City, wherever they may be, for putting this together. This event means a lot to me. I have come all the way from Oregon to be here. Seven Noble Knights is an epic novel that shows you how to get from a beautiful medieval wedding to a confused and deadly medieval battle. In spite of the overwhelmingly masculine character of 10th century Spain, mothers are actually really important characters in this book because it is about family, and without our mothers, where would we be? For this reading, I knew I had to focus on the mother par excellence, Doña Sancha. The 7 knights of the title are all her sons. She had to be a mythically amazing mother because surviving 7 childbirths in the 10th century is an epic feat already. She went on to raise all of them to be exemplary members of a warrior society. Her name, Sancha, means saintly, and I don't think it's ever been more appropriate. For the first scene, just to help you out a little bit, just know that all of the men are one of Doña Sancha's sons. All the scenes that I'm reading from today come from part 1, chapter 4. Doña Sancha's brother has married the coldly beautiful Doña Lambra, and the city of Burgos is still celebrating. Sancha has awakened to a lovely morning in which her brother has set up a jousting challenge on the riverbank. Sancha saw one of her own serving girls in the throng that had come to see the wooden castle. "Luz, have you seen my sons?" "Yes, my lady. Don Martin is playing chess in the inn, and his brothers are watching and betting." Sancha took the maid's arm, and they made their way through the crowd toward the city and the inn. "My sons won't want to miss this, no matter how much they're betting. I wonder who would bet against Martin. Everyone knows he'll win." Luz said, "He's playing against Don Fernando, and if I may be frank, I think he's going to let Don Fernando win so they can collect the wagers. It was Don Gonzalo's idea." "God save me," Sancha exclaimed. "Devil gets into that boy every way he can." "Luz, do you know whether they slept last night?" "My lady, I would guess they think it's still night." Doña Sancha threw open the door of the inn, casting daylight into the murk surrounding gamblers crowded around a chessboard with her 7 sons. Their symmetrical faces shone with interior light like saints in an altarpiece. Sancha shook her head. If people who stayed up all night to gamble needed a patron saint, they should make their choice here. "Mother, good morning," the 7 said. Doña Sancha sighed. "I shouldn't even tell you. I should take you all back to Salas this instant." "What shouldn't you tell us?" asked Gonzalo, grinning as he stood to embrace her. He had been knighted the year before, but his mother still had a hard time understanding that this earthy, musky male smell came from her youngest child. His boy stubble scraped her cheek. "Your uncle has set up a scaffold castle and called on all the knights to try and knock it over with their lances. He's going to give a prize to the one who does the most damage." The whole inn shouted with glee. Everyone stood up and made to go to the riverbank, but Martin stayed at the chessboard. "I'm nearly finished here. What about the bets?" "Oh, come on," said Gonzalo. "The prize will be much greater than any winnings we could take here, and one of us is sure to win." Martin nodded and gathered up the pieces as the bettors scrambled to take back their wagers. They surrounded their mother as they made their way to the riverbank, with everyone else from the inn trailing along. Sancha thought perhaps the bride, Doña Lambra, might warm to them if her sons would stop showing off so much. "I want you to promise me that you won't compete today," she pled with the 7 of them. "It would be unseemly for your uncle to give you a prize. You're already the most honored knights in Castile. What more could you want?" "Yes, of course," came the reply, uneven and muffled in the hustle. She thought they all agreed, but couldn't be sure she heard 7 voices. Suero's goshawk squawked sleepily. If Suero hadn't slept, the poor bird hadn't slept either. "And where is your tutor?" asked Sancha. "He should be keeping you from gambling." "Oh, he went to bed ages ago," said Gustio. Sancha sighed again. How could she expect their old tutor to keep up with a single one of these young men, let alone 7? So here we take a break. Gonzalo, the youngest son, goes ahead and competes in the jousting, and of course he wins, thus upstaging the bride's cousin. His name is Álvar Sánchez. And in truth, the bride would have preferred to marry her cousin than the man she did marry, Ruy Blásquez. The tight enclave around Doña Lambra did not yell or enjoy Gonzalico's capering as he accepted praise in the form of shouts and tossed flowers. Gonzalico made his way through the crush of spectators toward his family with his prizes. I wonder what our uncle's prize is going to be, now that you've won it, Gustio said. Sancha took young Gonzalo into her arms. He wasn't as tall as some of the knights in Burgos, but he towered over her. We knew you could do it, my dear one. But why didn't you keep your pledge to your mother not to compete? He bent down to kiss her cheek. I never promised. As her son escaped her embrace, Sancha felt a chill. She wondered when she had lost control of him, or whether she had ever had any influence over him. Álvar Sánchez led his steed through the crowd to come through to Doña Lambra's side. She didn't smile, but he took her hand. Don't fret, cousin. I have no need of your husband's prize, whatever it may be. I can earn all the wealth I need in the Count's service with my bravery, my skills, and my horse. Gonzalico turned to Álvar Sánchez. Sancha thought it must be the first time they looked each other in the eye since before the wedding ceremony. You're a very good lancer, Don Álvar, and the ladies like you too. They don't speak of any other knight but you. Sancha imagined her son was attempting to be a gracious winner. Everyone knew he wasn't telling the truth. The ladies had been cooing over Gonzalico since the family had arrived. Álvar was a good jouster and handsome enough, but the only one who preferred him to Gonzalo was Doña Lambra. Álvar Sánchez pulled out his already enormous chest and bared his teeth. They have every right to speak of me, since they understand that I'm better than all the knights here, even you. Gonzalo drove his fist into Álvar Sánchez's smirking face. Álvar collapsed at the feet of his horse, and it reared with a shriek that sounded the way Sancha felt. With nowhere else to land in the crush of people, its sharp hoofs came down on Álvar's flesh. He grunted and threw his arms out to defend himself, but it reared again and again in terror and confusion, coming down harder each time. Sancha's husband shielded her face from flying dirt clods and tufts of grass. A few more sharp cries, and Álvar was silenced, even as men shouted at the horse and pages darted under it, dodging the deadly legs as they tried to pull Álvar to safety. His teeth bounced and rolled on the earth or landed on people's shoes like cast dice. Young Gonzalo reached for the horse and seemed to hold the mane in his fist, but the animal escaped his grasp each time. Finally, someone seized the reins and led the horse away, still kicking. Blood sprouted from Álvar Sánchez's body and raced outward, covering the ground with a steaming red plague. Doña Lambra let out a scream louder than any of the lance blows had been on the scaffold. Her maid dropped to her knees and took Álvar Sánchez's bloodied head in her hands. She looked up at Doña Lambra and shook her head. Dead? The lady asked. Yes, the maid whispered. Fetch a priest, said Sancha. She held tight to her son's arm. Gonzalico, what have you done? She whispered into his ear. He opened his mouth and shook his head in disbelief. He had wanted to stop Álvar Sánchez from outshining him during these entire festivities. Had it been more than boyish competitiveness? Son, I have to know whether you did this intentionally. Tell me now. How could I intend his own horse to kill him? Of course I wasn't trying to kill him. She let go and was sorry she doubted him. Her son would never murder even the most blasphemous traitor in the middle of a wedding celebration. Doña Lambra tore at her silk, sending crisp sounds through the air. Along with her, excuse me. Doña Lambra tore at her silk, sending crisp sounds through the air, along with her grating sobs. She strode among a crush of people, wading through the blood and teeth to face young Gonzalo. Excuse me. He was my cousin. He won the prize. Never before has a bride been so dishonored at her own wedding. Ruy Blásquez will repay this betrayal. Sancha wiped at the tears coming down her own cheeks. Oh, dear sister-in-law, he didn't mean to do it. Let us pay the homicide fee and have masses sung for all of our souls. Ruy Blásquez, still holding the lance he had used against the scaffold, took Lambra's shaking hand and looked into her wild eyes. She wrenched away to point at Gonzalico. Do something! Are you my husband by these nuptials or not? Sancha shouted, Brother, he's your nephew! Ruy Blásquez struck Gonzalico across the face with the sharp end of the lance. Gonzalo fell onto his seat and blood streamed from a gash that started on his cheek and went diagonally up the bridge of his nose to the opposite eyebrow. At the sight of her son's blood, Sancha broke away from her husband and lunged toward the wound with a handkerchief, grabbed from Luz's ready hands. But Gonzalo pushed her away, staining her sleeves with garish smears. Blood panicked her. She'd often wondered whether 7 healthy warrior sons was too much blessing for one family. Sancha's other brothers had weakened and died before their training could even begin. And the last stillborn had killed her mother when Sancha had 13 years. The first strong son had filled Sancha with joy. She tried not to gloat over the second. When Suero was born, she'd begun to cut herbs and place bundles on bedrolls at the instruction of the midwife, without telling her priest. The fourth son, she knew, was seriously tempting the devil, and she still had trouble believing Gonzalico had survived 15 years with no mishap. He got back to his feet, wobbling, refusing his brother's help. "For God's sake, Uncle," he said blithely, "as your nephew, I never deserved such a blow." He turned to his brothers. "I beg you not to sue my uncle over my death if I die here." "Sweet boy, you won't die here," said Sancha. She didn't feel as sure as she sounded. Perhaps her 7th son had been born in an evil hour after all. She tried again to hold Gonzalo, to press her crucifix to his lips for protection, but he swiveled once again, tottering. "But Uncle, for the sake of your love for me, I beg you not to hit me again, because you couldn't suffer the consequences." Excuse me. From here, the scene continues to escalate. Ruy Blásquez's nose is broken and the troops are called in. Sancha threw her hands up in despair. "Santiago Apostle, turn them away from each other!" The clattering soldiers crushed in upon them. Count Garcia arrived at the sight of the commotion, parting the soldiers like the Red Sea. He made a sweeping gesture and raised his voice in announcement. "Let it be known to all present that I, Garcia Fernandez, Count of Castile, hereby pardon Gonzalo Gonzalez for the unintended slaughter of Álvar Sánchez. He will pay no homicide fee." Doña Lambra let out a strangled cry and toppled into the arms of her poor maid. The Count ignored her. "I further pardon Ruy Blásquez for his offense against Gonzalo Gonzalez's person, and consider that any debt incurred for such wounding has been paid with the breaking of Ruy Blásquez's nose." Ruy Blásquez emitted a loud snort, then winced in pain. But Sancha's husband nodded in agreement. He knelt at the Count's feet, saying, "As your humble servant, my lord, I am honored by your wise judgment." Sancha smiled and nodded encouragement. Her husband stood and announced, "And to show my family's goodwill toward Ruy Blásquez and his wife, I give my 7 sons, all peerless warriors with experience in the south against the Moors, to serve in Ruy Blásquez's army. There is no better place I could commend them to, since Ruy Blásquez's honor and power are feared by Moor and Christian throughout Hispania." As usual, peace could only come about if Sancha sacrificed her mother's rights over her sons, and they would leave her yet again. But they would watch over each other, and her brother would forgive Gonzalico. Harmony among the male family members must take precedence over her desire to kiss and hold the precious men she'd given birth to. She smiled her agreement, though it wasn't called for. Thank you.